We're ready. So welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Thursday, August 12th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Res Heads Entertainment was contacted by some friends recently from the Boys Fort Chippewa Reservation in northern Minnesota. The news they received was quite shocking. A few weeks ago, a 21-year-old member of the band was found beaten and lying naked on the street with severe burns over half of his body, and his clothes lying next to him on the ground still smoldering. According to the victim's mother, Maybelline Anderson, Forrest King is doing better, but was in critical condition a few days ago. Two suspects have been named in that act of violence and charged with attempted murder: Corey Blake Two Crow, 37, and Vince Hansen, 28. Res Heads Entertainment has been asked to help coordinate an event that not only help uplift their community but raise awareness and at the same time raise some money for the family in need. A date has not been set yet, but they're looking at late August or early September, and Res Heads Entertainment is looking for a few more speakers, comedians, and musicians to assist in those efforts. You can get a hold of Res Heads Entertainment at 304 Myrtle Drive in Jacksonville, Texas, 75766. Their phone number is 405-501-7359, and we'll put that information up so you can get the address and help out if you want. Sawyer County, Wisconsin authorities and LCO Tribal Police are investigating an alleged hate crime against a 16-year-old youth on the LCO Reservation in northern Wisconsin. According to family members, on July 11th, Robert Hammond was allegedly jumped by at least two non-native men on the reservation, severely beaten and then burned on the face, as they told him that if he wanted to be an Indian, then he needed to look more like one. Hammond was airlifted to Duluth, Minnesota area hospital with two black eyes, broken nose, and serious burns to his face. A federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit by descendants of the Apache warrior Geronimo, who claimed some of the remains were stolen in 1918 by a student society at Yale University. The lawsuit was filed last year in Washington by 20 descendants who wanted to rebury Geronimo near his New Mexico birthplace. It claims Skull and Bones members took some remains from a burial plot at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where Geronimo passed away in 1909. Judge Richard Roberts granted a Justice Department motion to dismiss, saying the plaintiffs didn't establish the government had waived its right not to be sued without its consent. He also dismissed the lawsuit against Yale and the society, saying the plaintiffs cited a law that applies only to Native American cultural items excavated or discovered after 1990. Skull and Bones is not officially affiliated with Yale University. And if I said July 11th on that story about Robert Hammond, that was actually August 11th on a Wednesday. A federal appeals court ruled this week that the Oneida Nation isn't entitled to 250,000 acres in upstate New York or compensation for the Aboriginal land it claimed was illegally purchased by the state in the 18th and 19th centuries. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a 2007 ruling on the land claim and went on to say the state can't be sued for the $500 million the tribe said it is owed. The ruling is the latest in a case filed in the early 1970s by the Wisconsin Oneida, New York, and Ontario Oneidas. 3 years ago, U.S. District Court Judge Lawrence Kahn rejected the land claim based on earlier rulings that said it was way too late to file. And today we talked to Alaska Public Radio Network News Director Lori Townsend about the recent death in an airplane crash of former Alaska Senator Ted Stevens.
Good. Lori Townsend, a difficult time in Alaska here the last few days for people affiliated with the late Senator Ted Stevens. Can you tell me a little bit about how the Alaskan Native communities are reacting to his passing?
Yes, reactions pouring in from around the state, Paul. There's a lot of... Ted Stevens has a real long history with the tribes here in the state, and there's been a lot that he's advocated for. There's also the times that they've been at odds, but I think overall, tribes would say that he was a tremendous advocate for rural Alaska and helped steer money there that helped with water and sewer systems, with keeping the airports maintained. He would go to bat when there was efforts in Washington to cut funding to things like rural airports in small communities. And I heard him one time on the Senate floor just railing against the proposed cuts, saying, you don't have any idea what it's like to be in a small community and not have a road system and have an emergency and try to get out. And he would stave off those kind of things and make sure that it didn't happen. He also told the tribes that they had to figure out a way to try to regionalize their services, which didn't sit well with a lot of tribal leaders. They didn't like that idea of regionalization. They wanted to be in charge of their own affairs and wanted their tribal money to come to their communities. But Stevens said, I'm not going to be here all into the future, and you're going to have to figure this out because people aren't going to be able to get this money for you like I'm able to now. And he also said, I can't get money for 200 different tribal housing authorities, 200 different tribal governments. You have to consider regionalizing your services. He was very upset when Ada Deer made the tribes here in Alaska into tribes, gave them tribal legitimacy, and that was something that rankled him
as
for a long time.
Right? As individuals rather than corporate entities?
Yes, that didn't sit well with Stevens, and it wasn't that he didn't have great admiration, or I don't know if admiration is the right word, but it wasn't that he didn't appreciate and respect would be the right word, the Native people here in Alaska, because he certainly did. But he was looking at it from a political, financial aspect as a senator and saying, this will never fly. This just can't be sustained into the future. And so he warned about that. But Ted Stevens' mark is on so many accomplishments here for tribes in the state. The Alaska Native Hospitals Complex is one of the places.
Yeah, Mark Trahant in his reports was saying it was probably one of the better facilities in the United States, if not the world.
It is. It's an amazing facility, and it's a very well-run, highly professional, fantastic facility, beautifully constructed, and Ted Stevens' work is there, very evident there. Also, the Denali Commission that has helped put in safe water systems and sewer systems in rural Alaska has helped to upgrade tank farms so that villages can get more fuel in and get a better price because of it. That has helped also. These are all things that Ted Stevens helped do for tribes while he was a senator.
Kind of ironic that he one time predicted that he had this premonition that he would pass away in a plane crash. And he was an Air Force pilot, if I remember right, in the military.
He was a military pilot. He was part of the support for the Flying Tigers, some real legendary pilots that flew these impossibly large supply planes over the Himalayas. And it wasn't easy. It was very dangerous work. And he did that. He and Daniel Inouye have called themselves brothers for many years. They were very, very close, even though Inouye is a Democrat, Stevens was a Republican. They worked very well together, and it was sort of like the old guard style in Congress, where there was less partisan bickering and more cooperation between the two sides than we seem to see today.
They worked across the aisle with each other to bring programs home.
Yes, for Alaska Natives and Native Hawaiians. They worked very closely together to make sure that the two states that were so far away that most people don't see them on a map. Most of the time when they see a map of the United States, you don't see Alaska or Hawaii. We're kind of stuck off to the side somewhere. in a way, and Stevens worked very hard to make sure that Native people in those two states were not forgotten when it came to legislation. And Stevens was unapologetic about steering a lot of money to Alaska. He said, we're a young state, we have a lot that we need to catch up on. We weren't in on the big infrastructure projects that other states were able to get money for. And we have needs here. We're a large state with very remote communities and some real interesting logistical challenges when it comes to accessing places. And so he was proud of being able to bring money to the state, didn't apologize for it.
People can find these stories on Senator Stevens at
aprn.org. Today we had a special Talk of Alaska program. It's our statewide call-in program, and we had a special on Senator Stevens, and that audio is posted on our website. A lot of people from around the state had wonderful stories to tell, called in with their remembrances. And Stevens started working when he was a private attorney, before he worked in the Interior Department and before he became a senator, working with tribes on their land claims, because there was a realization that they were going to have to address this as Alaska was moving towards statehood. And so he started working on those things, and some of that was brought out during the Talk of Alaska program today, so that his ties to the tribes go back a very, very long way. And people can find that audio and all of our stories, especially from Monday's newscast and Tuesday's newscast, on aprn.org.
Okay, I know you're busy. Thanks for joining with us, and we hope to catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you all for joining with us today. Come back again tomorrow for Kim Acosta.